These 4 stories were retrieved from archives and special collections at Western Illinois University in Macomb, Illinois. Thanks to Dr. Michael Lorenzen, university archivist and professor, as well as to Bill Cook, senior library specialist, for their assistance in finding and using these stories. Margaret Peggy Chen-Williams. I never told many people about what happened that autumn night in 1968. Now at 73, sitting in my Florida retirement home in 2023, I figure it's time to share my story. I'm Margaret Peggy Chen-Williams, born in 1950 to a Chinese immigrant father and an Illinois farm girl mother. I was always caught between worlds. Growing up in Peoria, I dreamed of becoming a teacher, something my father, who worked 2 jobs to support us, strongly encouraged. Western Illinois University accepted me with a partial scholarship, making me the first in my family to attend college. Sherman Hall was already an imposing presence when I arrived as a freshman in 1968. That Georgian-style building, with its red brick and white trim, housed my evening education psychology class. Being one of only 3 Asian American students on campus wasn't easy, but I was determined to succeed. It happened during midterms week in October. I was studying late in the second-floor classroom, the one with the tall windows overlooking the quad. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Distinct clicks of hard-soled shoes on the wooden floors. Nothing unusual except the footsteps kept passing by my door, back and forth, in perfect rhythm. After the 7th pass, I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps continued, now behind me. The temperature dropped dramatically. Then I saw her. A young woman in a 1920s dress, her face twisted in anguish. She reached toward me, her mouth moving without sound. The papers on my desk scattered, and I caught a glimpse of what looked like chalk marks on her neck before she vanished. I ran all the way back to my dorm. Later, I researched and found that in 1922, a student named Elizabeth Morton had been found dead in that classroom, allegedly by suicide, though rumors suggested otherwise. The case was never fully resolved. That encounter changed my life's trajectory. While I did become a teacher, graduating in 1972, I developed an intense interest in documenting oral histories, particularly those of marginalized people whose stories often go untold. I taught high school history in Chicago for 30 years, encouraging my students to look beyond official narratives and seek out hidden stories. I married David Williams in 1975, had 2 children, and eventually earned my PhD in educational history in 1985. My dissertation focused on the untold stories of minority students in Midwestern universities during the early 20th century. I even included a chapter about Elizabeth Morton, though I never mentioned my personal experience. Now in 2023, I still think about that night. When my granddaughter recently told me she'd been accepted to WIU, I felt a familiar chill. I didn't discourage her, but I did tell her to pay attention to the stories that whisper through those old halls. Not all history is written in books, and sometimes the most important lessons come from the stories we're afraid to tell. The experience taught me that every place holds its secrets, and every person has a story worth telling. That's been my life's work, giving voice to the voiceless, whether they're living or long gone. Sometimes I wonder if Elizabeth chose to reveal herself to me because she knew I would understand what it meant to be an outsider, to have a story that others might try to erase. I've never returned to that classroom in Sherman Hall, but I've heard from others over the years who've had similar experiences. Each time I listen carefully and record their stories, because that's what I learned that night in 1968. Every story, no matter how incredible, deserves to be heard. The ghost in Sherman Hall showed me that history isn't just about dates and facts. It's about the echoes that linger, the voices that persist, and the courage to listen when they speak. That's the real lesson I've carried through all these years. One that's shaped not just my career, but my entire life. Bobley Ray Miller. Let me tell you what happened to me last May of 2022. I ain't told many folks because most people think I'm already a few screws loose, working that night shift at the hog farm outside Colchester and all. Name's Bobby Ray Miller, born right here in McDonough County back in '85. Never was much for school. Dropped out of Macomb High in '03. Mama always said I had more muscle than brains, but I done all right for myself. Got my CDL, drove trucks for a while, then settled into farm work because it felt more like home. So anyway, this thing happened when I was taking that back road shortcut through Spring Creek Woods, heading home from my shift around 2:30 in the morning. You know that stretch where the creek bends near the old Thompson place? Where them trees hang over the road so thick you can't see the sky? I was in my old Ford F-150, the blue one with the dent in the tailgate from when my cousin Billy tried to back up with the trailer. Radio wasn't working that night, so it was real quiet like, just my tires on the gravel. Then my truck just died, right there in them woods. No sputter, no nothing, just died. Now, I ain't exactly Mr. Fix-It, but I know enough to check the basics. Turned the key a few times, nothing. Popped the hood, looked around with my flashlight. Everything seemed normal. That's when I heard it. This weird singing, like someone humming an old hymn, but all wrong-like. Sounded like it was coming from down by the creek. Now, any sensible person would have stayed in their truck, but ain't nobody ever accused me of being sensible. I walked toward that sound, my boots crunching on dead leaves. The moon was bright that night, making weird shadows through them trees. The singing got louder, and I swear on my mama's Bible, I saw something moving in the creek. It looked like a woman in one of them old-timey dresses, like from them history books. But she was wrong. Her feet weren't touching the ground, and where her face should have been, there was just this dark blur. She was holding something in her arms, like a bundle or maybe a baby. Then she turned toward me, and I heard this sound, like when you drag a metal rake across concrete, but 100 times louder. My flashlight went dead, and I felt this cold that went right through my bones into my soul. I ran back to my truck faster than I ever run before. Key turned right over, like there'd never been nothing wrong with it. I got out of there so fast I nearly put that truck in the ditch twice. Here's the weird thing. Next day I asked old Tim at the gas station about it. He got real quiet and told me about how back in the 1890s, some woman lost her baby in that creek during a flood. They found her 3 days later, still searching the water, but she'd died from the cold. Tim said his granddaddy used to tell stories about seeing her on spring nights. Since then, I ain't taken that road home, even if it adds 20 minutes to my drive. Changed my whole life, if I'm being honest. Started going to church again. Quit drinking. Even signed up for some night classes at the community college, figuring maybe Mama was wrong about my brains after all. Every time I drive past that turnoff to Spring Creek Road, I say a little prayer. Not just for me, but for her too. That poor woman still looking for her baby after all these years. Makes you think about what's really important, you know? Some folks don't believe me when I tell this story. That's all right. I wouldn't have believed it neither if it hadn't happened to me. But I know what I saw that night, and I ain't never gonna forget it. These woods got stories, old stories, and sometimes they reach out and grab hold of you whether you're ready for them or not. I still work that same job, still drive that same old truck, but I ain't the same person I was before that night. Sometimes the scariest things in life can put you on a better path. At least that's what Pastor Mike says. All I know is there's more to these old woods than most folks realize, and some nights, when the moon's full and the wind's just right, I can still hear that humming coming from down by the creek. Ruth Ann Miller. I've lived in McDonough County all my 87 years, born right here in 1936, and I never told this story outside the family. But I reckon folks ought to know what happened out at the old Larson place back in the summer of '55. I'm Ruth Ann Miller. Was Ruth Ann Peterson before I married my Harold, God rest his soul. Been living on our family farm just outside Good Hope since I was born. Except for them 2 years I tried working as a secretary in Macomb. City life wasn't for me. My daddy used to say I had dirt in my veins instead of blood. The Larson place, that big white farmhouse with the wraparound porch about a mile down Cooper Road, well, it wasn't always the Larson place. Used to belong to the Whitakers before the bank took it in '39. Sits empty now, has since old man Larson passed in '98. Windows all boarded up, paint peeling something awful. Shame what time does to a good house. I was 19 that summer, helping Mama tend to our garden and looking after my younger sisters while Daddy worked the fields. The Larsons had just moved in that spring. Eric Larson, his wife Betty, and their 3 little ones. They'd come up from Kentucky, bought the place cheap after it sat empty for near 16 years. One evening in July, I was walking home from visiting my friend Martha. Took the long way round past the Larson place because it was such a nice evening. Sun was just starting to set, making everything gold-like. That's when I saw the little girl on the porch. She was wearing one of them pinafore dresses, like Little House on the Prairie style, sitting in that old porch swing. Thought she must be one of the Larson kids, though something seemed off. The swing wasn't moving, but I could hear it creaking clear as day. I called out, "Hello there!" being neighborly as we were raised to be. She turned to look at me, and Lord have mercy. Her face was like looking at an old photograph, all faded and blurry-like. Then she just wasn't there anymore. But that swing, it started moving something fierce, no wind or nothing. I ran all the way home, told Mama what I saw. She got real quiet, then told me something nobody much talked about. Back in 1918, during that awful flu epidemic, The Whitakers' youngest daughter, Emily, died on that very porch. She'd been sick for days, and one evening they found her in that swing, peaceful-like, as if she'd just fallen asleep. Next Sunday at church, I got up the courage to ask Betty Larson if they'd seen anything strange. She started crying right there in the vestibule. Told me their youngest, Katie, had been talking about playing with a little girl on the porch, one who looked like an old picture. They moved out by Christmas. That was 68 years ago now. I've seen plenty more out at that house over the years. Lights in windows when there ain't no electricity. That swing moving on the stillest nights. My Harold used to say I was just seeing things, but he never could explain why the horses wouldn't go near that place. I raised 5 children in this county, got 13 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren now. When they come visit and we drive past the Larson place, sometimes the little ones ask why nobody lives there. I just tell them some houses prefer to keep their own company. Folks nowadays, they want to tear down all the old places, build new houses with them fancy smart home gadgets. But some things ought to be left standing, I think. Some memories need their own space to live on in. I still drive past there sometimes, usually around sunset. Sometimes I see that swing moving, and I say a little prayer for Emily Whitaker. Been doing that for nigh on 70 years now. Guess I'll keep doing it till I join her and all them others who've passed on. You know what's funny? My great-granddaughter Jenny, she's studying history over at WIU, wants to write about all the old houses in the county. Asked me to tell her any stories I knew. I told her most of them, but this one, well, this is the first time I'm telling it proper. Some stories you hold on to until the time feels right. This county's got more stories than people nowadays, especially in them old farmhouses. Most folks just drive on by, too busy with their phones and such to notice. But if you slow down, look careful like at them old places round sunset. Well, sometimes the past ain't as far away as we think. Tom Reeves. You've probably driven past that big Victorian on East Carroll Street 100 times. The one with the turret and all that gingerbread trim. Well, back in 1974, when I was 9 years old, my family moved into that house, and what happened there that year changed me forever. I'm Tom Reeves, born and raised in Macomb. Dad taught biology at Western. Mom worked at the hospital. We'd moved from a little ranch house on Adams Street because Mom always wanted a real Victorian, as she called it. Got it for a steal, too. Should have been our first warning. The house had been empty for almost a decade before we bought it. Used to belong to the Hendersons, old Macomb money from way back. Their family had owned it since it was built in 1890. Dad used to joke that we got 3 ghosts for the price of 1 house, but he wasn't laughing by Christmas. First there was the lady, that's what we called her. Always appeared on the main staircase, wearing one of them long 1890s dresses, her hair up in a bun. She never did anything scary, just stood there looking sad, watching us. Found out later she was Margaret Henderson, who died in childbirth in 1893. She was the original lady of the house. Then there was the soldier. He showed up in my brother's room mostly, always in the corner by the window. Full military uniform, World War II style. That was Robert Henderson, Margaret's grandson, killed in France in 1944. He'd smoke these phantom cigarettes. You could smell the tobacco but never see the smoke. But the one that really got to us was the kid. Looked about my age, always wearing knickers and a cap like from old photographs. He'd bounce a ball in the attic at night, thump, thump, thump. We'd go up there, but the ball would be sitting still in the corner. Tommy Henderson died of polio in 1927. He was Margaret's great-grandson. The weird thing was, they seemed to have their own routines. The lady always appeared at dusk, walking down the stairs. The soldier showed up around 3 a.m., military time, Dad said. The kid, well, he was active whenever us kids were home from school. I remember this one night in October '74. Mom and Dad were at some faculty dinner. My older sister Karen was babysitting. We were watching TV when the lady appeared on the stairs. Instead of just standing there, she pointed upwards. Then we heard the ball bouncing in the attic, louder than ever. Karen said we should stay put, but I didn't listen. Went upstairs and there was the kid, clear as day, bouncing that red rubber ball. He looked right at me and smiled. Then the soldier appeared, and for the first and only time, all 3 ghosts were together. They seemed to be trying to show us something. The kid pointed to a loose floorboard. Karen came up and we pried it open. Inside was a box full of old letters, photographs, and a silver locket with a picture of the lady inside. After that night, the ghosts seemed calmer, like they just wanted their story remembered. We lived there until 1980, when Dad got a job at the University of Illinois. The ghosts never left, far as I know. The family that bought it after us moved out within a year. House has changed hands a lot since then. That experience shaped my whole life. Went on to study history at Western myself, class of '87. Now I work at the McDonough County Historical Society, documenting local history. Got a whole file on the Henderson family. Seems like they want their story told too. My own kids are grown now, living in Chicago and St. Louis. They roll their eyes when I tell this story, but every time they visit Macomb, they drive past that house real slow. My youngest, Sarah, swears she saw a lady in an old-fashioned dress in the turret window last Christmas. You know what's funny? That house made me love history in a way no book ever could. Made it real, personal-like. Sometimes when I'm working late at the Historical Society, cataloging old photographs, I'll come across pictures of the Hendersons. The lady, the soldier, the kid. They're all there, frozen in time, looking just like I remember them. Some folks say I imagined it all, that a kid's mind plays tricks. But I've got that silver locket in my office drawer to prove it wasn't just imagination. And sometimes, driving past that house at dusk, I still see the lady in the window, still watching, still waiting for someone to remember.